There's a new study that could showcase that if we stop drilling in Los Angeles and certain parts of California, we might create more pollution. Our guest today is James Rector, who's a UC Berkeley Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering. He's been looking into California oil and how the oil fields in California could cause more pollution if we stop drilling. I'm Siama Korami. Welcome to California Insider. James, it's great to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Siama.
You have done a new study that could change the way we look at oil drilling in California. Apparently, there's natural seeps in the areas where we do drilling. Can you tell us what you have discovered?
California has a lot of seeps, and California is unique in the world in that it has seeps literally going from Cape Mendocino all the way down to the San Diego border. And it has the second largest seep in the world offshore of Santa Barbara called the Coal Oil Point Seep, which is right off Isla Vista near Goleta, California, right near UCSB. It also has the La Brea tar pits, and the La Brea tar pits are the largest onshore seep in North America. So California not only has thousands of seeps along its coastline, but it also has some of the largest seeps in the world. And that is how California became an oil giant. People don't realize this, but California was the Saudi Arabia of oil in the late 1920s. And there is more oil in some areas of Long Beach and other places per square meter than any other place in the world. So California has a rich history of developing oil resources, and in fact, 100 years ago, literally throughout Los Angeles, there were rigs every 50 feet. What happens is that oil is created from organic material, and it's expulsed into the pore space in rocks. But because it's lighter than the water that's around it, the salt water down deep, it moves to the surface. And so if there's a pathway to go from miles underground to the surface, it'll find that pathway. And usually those pathways are along faults. So in Los Angeles area right here, we have what's called the Newport-Inglewood Fault, for example, that goes right from Huntington Beach all the way up through to Baldwin Hills and even Beverly Hills. And then there's the Whittier Fault. Both of those faults have had major earthquakes, but they're also pathways by which the oil that's generated and is pooled down in these oil fields goes up to the surface. So when we think about an oil field, it's not a perfectly contained reservoir. It leaks. And almost all the Los Angeles oil fields leak to some extent.
And you have made a study that is revealing new things about these seeps.
Yeah, I teach a class in energy and civilization at Berkeley. And that class exposes students to current issues with regards to what are we doing in California and in the world about reducing global emissions or looking at different types of energy sources. As an example, my students did, or a group of students did a paper on about 10 years ago now on whether we should close Diablo Canyon. And they discovered back then that it was a really dumb idea to close Diablo Canyon because we would just rely on more fossil fuels. We didn't have enough energy with other sources to do it. So anyways, this last year, one group, I said, why don't you look at abandoned wells? Because a big part of what California is doing now is they are trying to plug all the abandoned wells in the state, and really requiring oil operators to put most of their money into cleaning up largely the mess that they've made. Now, abandoned wells are a big deal because they are what I would call an artificial seep. They're an anthropogenic seep path. And as I was telling you, in California, we drilled hundreds and hundreds of wells back in the early days of the oil industry. We don't even know where these things are. most of them. They were done before we kept any records. And even if we kept records, a lot of times the way that we constructed the wells was inadequate and did not allow us to plug it. So we've not only got natural seeps along these fault paths, but we've got all these abandoned wells that are artificial seep paths. And we can't do anything about them. There's no way to even remediate those because we don't even know where the wells are half the time. So California does have a program to go after the wells where they know where the well is and they know that they can plug and abandon it and bring it back to the surface anyways, to a better place. But I started asking the question of the students, I said, so what? If we've got all these seeps and we've got all these wells that are abandoned, aren't we just playing whack-a-mole? In other words, if you imagine that I've got all this oil coming up underneath the ground, right? And I put my finger in one hole, what happens to the oil? Well, yeah, I stop it in that hole. That's good, and that takes care of the surface there. But the rest of the oil just goes around and seeps out in the surface anyways. And we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars doing this. And we started asking the question, is it a complete waste of money? And in some cases, we do believe that it's just a complete waste. In other cases, it's very valuable, but you whack-a-mole here and it comes up over here.
What's the impact of these seeps coming out from different places?
So what comes out of the seeps is mostly methane for the most part. Although if you have what we'll call fast paths, so if you're well connected to the reservoir, either by an abandoned well or by a fault path, you can also have reactive hydrocarbons like ethane and propane. And those cause ozone and cause smog, essentially. So you can have natural seeps causing smog as well.
What is the impact of them?
Sure. Methane, we know, is a very powerful greenhouse gas. It's about, depending on what time frame you use, about 80 times worse than CO2. So methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas. Then there are the reactive hydrocarbons like ethane and propane and these gases that can cause health issues.
These seeps, based on what you've studied, is that they are coming to the surface, but are we paying attention to them in a sense?
We've kind of forgotten about them. If you look at CARB's a regulatory body, California Air Resources Board, and they're not charged with looking at natural seeps. They're charged with cleaning up operations associated with air pollution. So they're focused on making sure that oil and gas production that's done in California today has as little emissions as possible. And they've been very successful at doing this. Our man-made emissions from production have dropped dramatically. And the big thing that came out of my paper, which wouldn't have happened 15 years ago, is that the ratio of man-made emissions from oil and gas production to natural and abandoned well seep emissions is about a factor of 10 to 100. What I mean by that is that equipment emissions are 1/10 to 1/100th what's actually naturally coming out of the ground or into these abandoned wells. So the weak link in the chain is no longer the equipment. I mean, we're down there kind of filing the littlest thing, and it's really not having much of an effect. And the big gorilla in the room now, as of 2025, are these seep emissions and these abandoned well emissions.
You're saying these are coming to the surface naturally and they're creating more emissions.
They're coming to the surface just because of buoyancy. And the paths that get them from down deep up to the surface are through these faults and through old well bores that we may not even be able to identify. Okay? So here's a big problem, right? Why are we spending all our time fixing some of these wells that may not have any impact if this gorilla is sitting there. The gorilla is there. I mean, that's kind of what we identified, but we're over here worried about issues that are trivial in comparison in terms of pollution and global warming. So this is going to sound heretical, but in some cases, the solution is to produce the oil and gas. If you cut off the source, if you eliminate the oil and gas in the reservoir, the seeps drop.
If you drill in and take the oil out, then they won't come out naturally.
Right. And this has been proven for decades.
But nobody has looked into this in California?
Nope. Some people have thought about it, and they know that seeps are reduced when you produce oil and gas from reservoirs. That's well known, and that's in the literature. But nobody's kind of put two and two together and said, oh, that's the big gorilla now. If I really want to address the big gorilla, I may have to, at least in some areas, produce the oil and gas. In other places, you may not have to worry about it. You may have already produced it down to the point where it's not an issue anymore. So this is going to be very location dependent. As an example, LA is a big one. We have huge seeps at the La Brea tar pits and in an area around there. And there have been lawsuits identifying cancer, wrongful death, and things like that. And they've always associated those with the oil operations, which is completely wrong. The reason that they're happening, if they can prove that, is that we have seeps and probably a lot of abandoned wells in that area.
So what you're saying is, if there are these seeps, they're definitely hazards.
They're hazards.
And in the areas that there are seeps, if they are in the cities, then it's better to do drilling. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying produce the oil underneath them. If they really are coming up, we want to stop that. That's very dangerous.
But nobody is looking at that, right? This is your study.
Nobody's put that together. And I think people are very uncomfortable in saying, well, I don't want to produce oil and gas. I mean, that's bad. And I think, that's a consensus in many areas of California.
Especially in the cities.
Especially in the cities. And yet, it may be the best thing to do, particularly in these local areas like near downtown Los Angeles and places like that. In other areas, we may have already produced the fields to the point where there are no seeps or there's no danger. And then producing oil and gas in those areas wouldn't really help.
This year, the dollar has lost 10% of its value so far. Well, I'm a big believer in dollar because I've lived in 4 countries and I know this is the best country. And if there was any paper currency anybody could trust, would be the dollar. It doesn't hurt to look into other options to preserve your capital. That's why we have the Beverly Hills Precious Metals Company sponsoring this episode. I did a short interview with the owner of this company to tell us what's happening in the gold and silver space. We're going to place this at the end of this episode. Make sure to watch this interview and let us know what you think. Now let's go back to our interview. You mentioned areas around downtown Los Angeles. Can you tell us what you have seen that you're saying that?
Well, I was shocked when I looked at the numbers. A little area of about around Hancock Park, if you know that area, and the environs, a few city blocks along with the La Brea tar pits. That area is about 5 square kilometers, and annually it emits the same amount of greenhouse gas equivalents as 350,000 cars.
Wow.
That's probably 1/10 of the cars in Southern California, IC engines.
And is there more in this area? Is there anything in Long Beach, in those areas? Because people have been complaining about the pollution in those areas.
We know that there are seeps in the Baldwin Hills area, in Inglewood, and there have been studies that say pretty much the corridor between LAX and downtown Los Angeles has substantially elevated methane emissions, like a factor of 5 more than average methane emissions. They've never directly associated it with seeps, but it seems to spatially correlate with the oil fields that exist in LA in that area. So another issue with seeps is that they are perfect places to start wildfires because they can be very highly concentrated in methane. If a fire were to run past a seep, it could be dramatically enhanced. And as a matter of fact, people in the Ventura foothills or in Ojai have been killed by being too close to a fire that hit a methane vent. And so then extrapolating that, if you have a lot of seeps above an oil field, you actually could have much more wildfire danger there as well. And in the Thomas fire, I believe, in 2017, there were real problems with putting out the fires around these seeps. It really hampered the firefighters' ability because they couldn't put out the fire.
A lot of people go by these seeps. Is there a health hazard with being next to them?
Well, it depends on what the pathway for the oil and gas to get from deep underneath where the oil field is, what that pathway is to the surface. If the pathway is diffuse, then likely it's not as dangerous because it won't have the volatile reactive gases like ethane and propane. It'll be mostly methane, which is not dangerous from a local health hazard, but of course it's a bad gas in terms of climate change. On the other hand, there are many seeps that are also what I would call fast path seeps. Some authors have called them macro seeps. And those are better connected to the deep reservoir, and those can have higher proportions of these reactive organic compounds, which can cause health hazards. Additionally, what I'm calling the anthropogenic seeps, so that is the old wells that were drilled in 1910 that are still connected to the reservoir, those are also fast path seeps. And the thing that has in common with the natural seeps is that unless you know where these wells are, there's nothing you can do about remediating them. So the only way to stop this stuff, whether it be the natural seeps or whether it be the abandoned well seeps, is by depleting the source, by getting rid of the hydrocarbon source at depth.
Meaning you have to drill or to take the oil out? It's shocking to hear that, right?
The study just says, here are the numbers, right? It's the implications that I'm talking to you here about that that's not part of the science, really. That's for everybody else to look at and go, oh my God.
Thank you for watching California Insider on YouTube. If you like our content, make sure to press the like button and comment so that the algorithm can reach more people. If you're not a subscriber yet, make sure to subscribe to our channel so that we can update you with the trends and issues that are going on in California. Now let's go back to the interview. Do you think you're going to get some pushback on this? Because this is a study that is saying we should do drilling, in a sense, like there's a case for drilling.
Well, I would not argue that right now. I would say there's a case that we need to study this more at this point. But we really should do some aggressive studying of this and really determine whether we can reduce emissions by producing the oil, for example, in Los Angeles. When you look at old pictures of the oil industry, it's not a pretty sight. If you look at an old picture of Venice Beach, there were wells lining the coastline back in the day, and obviously they caused a lot of pollution. So the way that the oil industry is what most people think about. They think about all these wells just right next to each other, drilling and producing oil and haphazardly spilling things. But that's not the oil industry of today. I've worked in the oil industry, and I've been an expert witness against the oil industry, and I think I have a fairly complete view of the good and the bad that the oil industry was and where it is today. And I think in California, we're at a great place in that the operations, say in downtown LA, nobody even knows they're there, or very few people do. And they're definitely not emitting any contaminants or any bad things into the air. If you've ever been to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles and the Beverly Center, there's a huge production facility with 45 wells right between those two buildings, just off of Gracie Allen Avenue, believe it or not. That production facility, if you were looking at the energy output that it creates for the state, is bigger than any of the major wind farms in the state annually.
In your study, you say that the emission is 10 times to 100 times from these natural seeps compared to the drilling.
Well, let's be specific. It's the natural seeps and these abandoned wells from 100 years ago contribute 10 to 100 times the emissions from active oil production in the state or in Southern California.
How did you guys study that? Did you guys do the study or?
No, we just looked at the literature. We literally just looked at the Southern California Air Quality District, which measures quarterly emissions from every single flange on a piece of production equipment at a wellhead. Like an individual wellhead may have 50 of these things. And they measure leaks on every single one of these, and they're fairly stringent. I think it's 500 parts per million is the cutoff for a leak or a not leak. And so we can gather indirectly an overall leak rate from those measurements. I would call that a bottoms-up approach. And then you can also look at it from the top down. You can say, all right, I know I have these methane emissions overall, and then I can subtract off the dairy industry, the landfill industry, which are very, very large, and you can see what's left. And what's left is a huge number that nobody has really explained. And we believe that that is a large component of natural and abandoned well seep emissions. You know, we've basically gone back and forth. It's not funded by anything. And again, I am not an expert in chemistry whatsoever or in emissions. But we looked at the literature, and we looked at the literature fairly carefully, we hope, and these were the numbers that just popped out.
Before doing this, did you think of these seeps being a big part to the pollution?
My gut said they were, just because when you think about flux of gases, say, the surface area of oil fields in California is enormous. In other words, these fault lines run for miles, and everywhere along some of these major faults is a potential source for seeps. And I'd driven around California, and I'd seen many of the seeps, and you can see methane bubbles coming right out. I mean, it's almost like something, if you remember the movie Alien, these viscous bubbles that come out that are methane bubbles in the seeps look like something from Alien. They're a little scary looking. They seem like they're alive. So my gut said that, yeah, I think there's something to this. It just kind of made sense to me that it would be significant.
And what's the process from here? You are about to publish your paper soon.
I hope that we can do more study. I hope that we can collaborate with other investigators, and even if we don't do it, because again, I'm not a chemist or anything, even if my group doesn't do it, I hope that it engenders more discussion and hopefully more study.
Do you think if we continue the path we're going, you think the pollution levels would go up in LA based on what you've seen so far?
Yes. We've done about what we can for at least the oil and gas equipment-related seeps. So any efforts on that part aren't really going to pay much in the way of benefits, because the grill is still sitting right next to us over here and still emitting. As a matter of fact, the new rules for production in urban areas is that you need to have a 3,200-foot setback from any housing in order to drill a new well or to re-drill a well or recomplete a well. So it's essentially shut down all development in Los Angeles. They can keep producing the wells that they're producing, but these wells degrade. They get scale and they get other things, and so their production drops, which is going to essentially increase seep rates.
Professor James, is anybody funding this research?
No, this came out of a class that I taught. It was an undergraduate project. And so right now, nobody's funding it. The oil industry isn't funding it. We're just doing it. I have worked in the oil and gas industry off and on for 45 years. I've developed technology for it. I have consulted for major oil companies like Chevron, trying to make their operations more efficient and image the earth better so that they can waste less money drilling and producing oil. But I've also worked as an expert witness against the oil industry. So, for example, I was an expert in a case where in Oklahoma, the oil industry, by doing water disposal, which was associated with massive fracking of the ground, started causing lots of earthquakes. And they denied that at the time. They said, well, it's not us. And over time, the body of evidence came out that it was just very, very compelling. So I was an expert essentially telling the oil industry that, no, this is what's really going on. Your injection of water at high pressures and high volumes is more likely than not, in terms of legal terms, causing earthquakes in Oklahoma. And I think that's pretty well agreed to now, because when the state stepped in and stopped or reduced the injection of water, the earthquakes went down. So I think we know that water injection does cause earthquakes in areas like Oklahoma and in West Texas. And so I'm all about doing the right thing. However we get there, right now, I think we do have a major issue with global warming and with emissions. So my question is, if we can produce our own oil in California, we can reduce emissions. Wouldn't we want to do that?
Which is fascinating, because most people would think it's otherwise, right? If you do the drilling, you will create more emissions. That's what the thought is.
And of course, the industry here has accurately noted that we import about 75% of our oil and gas. And that imported oil and gas is much dirtier than domestically produced oil and gas. Now, when you add in this seep component, it even becomes more unbalanced, if you will.
So you've been studying geology. Is there something unique about California and oil?
Well, California is like the perfect storm for oil generation. It has an active tectonic system that has major faults, like the whole San Andreas system, of which the faults in the LA basin are one component of. But it also has rich, what are called source rocks. In other words, you think about how is oil generated underground. And it takes a long time usually. Some oil can be hundreds of millions of years old. In California, it's actually very young. It can be as young as 500,000 years old. So California is a place where oil is being generated today. And that is unique in the world. It's not the only place, but it's one of the few places where this is happening. And so we have a constant, it's kind of like being in an area with active volcanoes. It's not the same thing. It's like being on the Big Island. You see all these lava flows from way back, and you know that Kilauea and other areas there are constantly erupting. Well, we're not erupting magma in LA, but deep underground, we're expulsing oil, which is always rising to the surface. Fortunately, perhaps, from a health point of view, we found all this oil 100 years ago, and we produced a decent amount of it, and probably dramatically reduced seeps in the LA basin.
And this is everywhere in California, right? Or is it more in LA?
Not everywhere in California. What I would do if I were going to tell you where it is I would show you a map of the oil fields in California and say that's where the seeps will be concentrated.
So James, is all your work in this industry, in the oil industry, or do you go outside of the oil industry?
No, I'm a seismologist, so I do sound in the ground. So I do many, many different applications of sound waves in the ground. For example, I develop techniques to look for buried treasure in mountains. The Victoria Peak treasure and buried treasure in the Philippines. I'm working with a professor of antiquities at the University of Chicago right now, trying to use seismic imaging to search for buried quanates in Kazakhstan, which were essentially the ancient aqueducts that brought water down from the mountains for irrigation into the Fertile Crescent, I guess it is. So I'll look for anything underground, and I actually find kind of this archaeological geophysics that I'm doing now really, really rewarding and exciting.
UC Berkeley Professor James Rector, it was great to have you on California Insider.
Thank you very much, CMI.
Now we go to Andrew Sorcini with Beverly Hills Precious Metals, who's sponsoring this video. The dollar has lost about 10% of its value over the last 6 months. Andrew, you've been in the gold business and you've been watching currencies, and what's happening?
Well, when we've seen the dollar get devalued by a lot of the BRICS nations, which are Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and a slew of other countries out there, they're trying to not use the dollar anymore. So the dollar is actually going down in value, but gold and silver are up about 25% each this year.
A lot of us that have international experience, we understand that the dollar is not really replaceable.
I do ultimately believe that. I think that the dollar does need to be backed by something real. So, for example, in June of last year, okay, the Saudi Arabia did not renew its contract for the petrodollar. It was a 50-year deal. It lasted exactly 50 years, from 1974 to 2024, and they did not renew it. So before that, the dollar was on the gold standard. It was backed by real gold. But when the dollar was backing the oil trades out of Saudi Arabia, that made it so that if China wanted to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they're trading in the dollar. It was a great, great move for the U.S. and for the dollar. But now that that is no longer the case, the dollar is struggling to find its place. But it is still the top currency in the whole world. It's still the world's reserve currency. But I do believe we need to go to a gold-backed dollar in some way.
In your space, there's a lot of people that talk about gold and they hype things up. They always say the dollar is going to crash, and there's a lot of hype.
It is true. There's so many companies out there that will call you and say, we just got 28 gold coins that were on the bottom of the ocean for 500 years on a shipwreck, and we've taken them out of the ocean, and we've got like 43 coins left, and you need to buy these today or you'll never get them again. You guys don't need to worry about those gimmicks here. We just offer gold and silver. We don't pressure people into doing it. And we don't really use the whole sky is falling thing to get you to do it. It's just gold and silver are a great hedge. Here in the United States, after the Great Depression, or probably even more so after World War II, we felt so sheltered that we're always taken care of here in the U.S., and that we don't need things like gold and silver to protect everything that we've worked for. But really, it is a great thing to own as part of your portfolio. It's the anchor, so to speak, when your real estate or stocks are down, your gold and silver will go up in value. So it really is a good thing to have in your portfolio. We've educated so many Americans, especially here right in Los Angeles, being born and raised here in California. I've actually been in this business for almost 40 years, based out of Los Angeles.
And this is a tool for preserving capital. It's not a money-making tool. It's like you have to go into it from the perspective that this is going to help preserve capital, not make extreme returns, even though in the last few years that has happened, right?
That's the number one reason that people should invest in gold and silver, because one way that it preserves capital is through inflation. The things that we buy with our dollar are starting to buy less and less because the dollar's lost a little bit of buying power due to inflation. But when gold goes up with inflation, that's how you offset it. And it's a great tool for that.
And can people hold this in their IRA accounts, retirement accounts?
Right now, that's a very popular way to do it. And people always have a lot of questions on how this works. So I do recommend that people reach out to us. But you can take an IRA, a 401k, you can take a government TSP account, and almost any other retirement account. You can roll it into a precious metals IRA that holds real physical gold and silver that's stored in a third-party depository in a lockbox with your name in it, and it's insured. And this is not a taxable event. So if you were to go and take $50,000 out of your IRA and try to buy gold with that, you could do it, but you'll have to pay tax on that $50,000. But when you roll it over from an IRA to a precious metals IRA, you bypass that. It's completely legal, and you can own physical gold and silver in the IRA. And your regular financial advisor isn't going to tell you about this because it's not an option that they have.
Now, how can people contact you?
They should go to our website, which is bh-pm.com/California Insider. And again, if you Google Andrew Sorcini or Beverly Hills Precious Metals, okay, you'll see our website. When you go on there, go on the partners page and find the landing page for California Insider and fill out the online form. Okay, you put in your first name, last name, email address, how you heard about us. You can put CMAC, or you could put California Insider. And the notes section is the most important because we offer a free consultation, and most people welcome that. Sometimes people will write in the notes section, "I'm a newbie, I don't know anything about gold and silver. Please help me get the education necessary so that I can make a good decision for me and my family." Other people say retirement account. "I want to learn how this works." Or, "I don't need a consultation. I've been buying gold and silver for years. I just want to give you a shot to earn my business." Whatever you want in the notes section helps me get you the best help from my company. And our response time is lightning quick, and we do not pressure people. We recommend that you, if you're not sure, you take a step back, talk with your family about it, pray about it if you need to. But this is an important decision, and you don't want to make a mistake by making an emotional one. You want to make one based on the education that we help provide you with.
And when you guys call Andrew, make sure to tell them that you're a California Insider viewer so that they can take good care of you guys.
Absolutely. And we're really looking forward to speaking with everybody that reaches out. And we're available on the weekends. We're available late into the evening. So call or fill out the online form at any point, and we'll get back with you as soon as possible. You can reach out to us at 866-346-5325. And I'll repeat it again. It's 866-346-5325.
And for those of you that are watching on YouTube, we're going to leave you a link below so you can click on the link and get to the form. Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, I'm so grateful to be here, and I hope to have the opportunity to jump back on and talk about more specific issues on how gold and silver can help people.